Robert Lancaster had spent his entire life chasing something: success, stability, a sense of purpose. And for most of it, he had believed he had found it. His name was respected in the corporate world, his bank account was full, and his home was grand. But none of that mattered when he woke up alone every morning, staring at the empty side of the bed where his wife, Emily, used to sleep. It had been 5 years since Emily passed. 5 years since their children had moved on with their own lives. 5 years of quiet evenings, unanswered phone calls, and dinners eaten alone at a table meant for two. At first, he had kept himself busy. He threw himself into his work, staying late at the office even when there was no real reason to. He filled his calendar with meetings, business trips, and financial planning, as if staying occupied could somehow make the ache of loneliness disappear. But when retirement finally came, there was no more work to distract him, only time. And time, as he quickly realized, could be a cruel companion. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, felt hollow. The walls echoed with memories, Emily's voice calling from the kitchen, the sound of their children running up and down the stairs, the soft hum of music playing on quiet Sunday mornings. But those sounds had long since faded, replaced by the eerie silence of an empty home. He had once thought retirement would be a reward, a time to finally enjoy life after decades of hard work. But instead, it felt like a cruel joke. He had spent decades building a future, only to arrive at this stage of life with no real sense of how to live it. The days blended into one another. Mornings were slow, afternoons dragged on, and evenings felt unbearable. He would sit by the window, watching as neighbors walked their dogs, as couples strolled hand in hand, as life carried on around him, without him. Some nights, he would pick up the phone to call his children, only to hesitate and set it back down. They had their own families now, their own responsibilities. He didn't want to burden them with his loneliness. Instead, he found himself replaying old memories. The first time he met Emily at a bookstore, the way she had laughed at his terrible joke. Their honeymoon in Paris, where they had gotten lost but ended up finding the most beautiful little cafe. The late-night talks about dreams, about the life they wanted to build together. But dreams, as he had learned, didn't always come with guarantees. As the weeks stretched into months, Robert realized he was stuck, trapped in a life he didn't recognize, unsure of how to move forward. That was, until the day he found the letter. The letter that changed everything. One rainy afternoon, with nothing better to do, Robert found himself in the attic, sorting through old boxes of memories. He ran his hands over the dusty albums, old love letters, and postcards from places they had once dreamed of visiting. Then, in the corner of one box, he found a faded envelope. The handwriting on it made his breath catch, Emily's. It was addressed to him. His fingers trembled as he carefully opened it and began to read. Robert, if you're reading this, I hope you've learned to slow down. I hope you've forgiven yourself. And I hope you've realized that life doesn't end when you retire, it begins again. Find joy. Find love. Find yourself. I'll always be with you, but don't let life pass you by. Tears welled up in his eyes. She had always known him better than he knew himself. He sat there for what felt like hours, staring at her words. And for the first time in years, he asked himself, what if she was right? What if I still had time? That night, something shifted inside him. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he knew he couldn't stay stuck in the past any longer. So, he made a decision. He dusted off his passport and booked a trip to Italy, Emily's dream destination, the place they had always talked about but never visited. For the first time in decades, Robert was stepping into the unknown. The journey begins. Florence greeted him with its warm air, ancient streets, and the soft murmur of a language he didn't understand. At first, he felt like a stranger, not just to the city but to his own life. He wandered through the bustling piazzas, marveling at the art, but his mind was still caught in the past. At dinner, he found himself sitting alone, surrounded by couples and families. The loneliness threatened to swallow him whole. Then, something unexpected happened. As he struggled to order his meal in broken Italian, an elderly woman at the next table chuckled. "You're trying," she said in English, "but let me help before you accidentally order something terrible." Her name was Isabella, a retired schoolteacher with a spirit as vibrant as the city itself. She had lived in Florence her entire life and had an infectious way of making the ordinary seem magical. "You don't experience Florence like a tourist," she told him. "You experience it like someone falling in love, with the city, with life, with yourself." Over the next few days, Isabella took him under her wing. She introduced him to hidden spots tourists never found, tiny family-run cafes, quiet gardens, and forgotten alleys that told centuries of stories. With her, Robert learned to slow down. To savor the taste of freshly made pasta. To listen to the laughter of street musicians. To appreciate the beauty of a sunrise over the Arno River. And, somewhere between the cobblestone streets and late-night conversations over wine, he realized something profound. He had spent his entire life waiting for happiness, thinking it would come after the next promotion, after retirement. But happiness wasn't something to chase. It was something to live. The art of letting go. One evening, while standing on the Ponte Vecchio bridge, Isabella asked, "What's the one thing you regret the most?" He hesitated before answering. "Not being present. I was always so focused on building a future that I forgot to live in the moment." She smiled knowingly. "Then don't waste any more time. Live now." And that night, for the first time in years, he did. He let go. Of the regrets. Of the guilt. Of the weight of the past that had kept him frozen in time. He danced with strangers in the streets. He painted for the first time in decades. He allowed himself to laugh, really laugh, without feeling guilty about it. By the time his trip ended, he wasn't just leaving Florence. He was leaving behind the man who had been trapped in yesterday. A new beginning. When Robert returned home, the world felt different. Or maybe, he was different. He reconnected with his children, not out of guilt, but out of a genuine desire to be present in their lives. He started painting again, filling his home with colors and life. Most importantly, he no longer measured his days by productivity but by moments of joy. One morning, while sipping coffee on his porch, he whispered, "Thank you, Emily. Not just for the letter, but for loving him enough to remind him that life was still waiting to be lived." Because sometimes, life gives you a second chance. And this time, Robert didn't let it slip away.